Sparta. Ancient Sparta. How much do you know about ancient Sparta, the ancient Greek city-state of warriors? Well, I'll tell you this. This is something you probably already know. Maybe you watched the movie 300 and you found this out, but Spartan boys were taken away from their families and they never returned home again. And they were taken away from their families at the age of 7. 7 years old. The Spartans were obviously a militaristic society. They were interested in creating the finest, toughest warriors who ever lived. That was, every part of their society was geared towards that. And after years and years and years of testing this and testing that and testing this and testing that, the Spartans figured out, at least in their minds, that at 7 we can start him. And it was brutal. 7 years old. Bye, Mom. Bye, Dad. I'm going off to warrior school where I'll spend the rest of my life. And the end result, of course, was Spartans were historically legendary warriors. You think about the assassinations and assassination attempts we've seen just in recent years in the United States of America. Talk about the scumbag who assassinated Charlie Kirk. I think he still had pimples. Talk about that goober who shot Trump in the head and did kill somebody at that Trump rally in Butler. Young man. Talk about the guy who murdered the United Healthcare CEO on the streets of New York City. Young man. These aren't old, crazy people. These are young men with their entire lives ahead of them, and those lives are now over. In the case of Butler, it actually is over. The others will probably spend the rest of their lives, if not the significant portion of their lives, in prison. No wives, no kids, no grandkids, no t-ball games, no church on Sunday. Life over because of decisions they've made. Now, why did they make these decisions? Well, I want to show you something. You obviously know who Rachel Maddow is. Rachel Maddow, of course, is that butch lesbian on TV. She's had a big show for a very long time. You know, she's got the crew cut and everything else. Communist, America hater. And you know what she looks like, right? Do you know what Rachel Maddow used to look like before she went to college? Look at that. Look at that. It really brings it up. 4 years it took to go from the picture on the left to the picture on the right. How is that humanly possible? Well, communists in the United States of America understand the exact same thing the Spartans understood so many years ago. You've got to get the kids. You've got to grab them when they're children, get them as early as you possibly can get away with, grab them and start training them early. And I want to stress this, especially to older Americans, not because you're dumb or something like that. That's not the case at all. If you are older and you went to school years and years and years and years ago, the education system today is nothing, and I mean nothing like the one you went to when you were a child. It is nothing like that at all. And there's a reason for that. The communists decided they were going to infiltrate probably our most important institution, if we're being honest, certainly one of the most important ones, the education system. They infiltrated the education system with committed communist warriors. These people, they go into work as administrators, as textbook authors, as principals, as school board members, as teacher themselves, and they are not concerned at all with teaching Aiden, Jaden, and Braden how to write, how to form a sentence, how to do math, about science, chemistry. They're not interested in that. They'll do that only to the degree they are required to do that. They consider themselves to be communist recruiters, recruiting and training the next generation of communist foot soldiers. These are your teachers now.
So I run the Pride Club at my school, and I'm having kind of an issue with another teacher in the school building right now. I have a couple kids who have come to me and told me that she has called them out in the middle of class for being gay. She said some pretty terrible things about me and the club, telling kids that she thinks it's stupid and a waste of time, and, we're pulling kids out of her class, which technically, yes, we are pulling kids out of the class. I have okayed this with my administration, with my principal, my admin, all that, because the kids told me straight up, they were like, we don't want to have it after school just in case, because some of their parents don't know. It would make them feel more comfortable to just, do it at school. That way it's a little more, discreet. So it is completely okay with my admin that I am running this club during school hours. And again, it's only 30 minutes a week.
That's a child predator. She didn't take that job to teach. She took that job to steal your children. And look, I know it's weird to think because you don't think like this, neither do I. The communist genuinely thinks that your children belong to them. They say it all the time.
When your children walk into our classroom, they become ours.
The children are always ours, every single one of them, all over the globe. And I am beginning to suspect that whoever is incapable of recognizing this may be incapable of morality. From Gaza to Little Village to all girls and all over the country, the children are all ours, every single one of them, and it is our duty to fight for them.
That's how they think. We have to acknowledge that that is the state of our education system, and we have to fight it because we can't allow these people to steal our children. They are devils out to steal, kill, and destroy, and we have to stop them. We have an incredible show for you. Alvin Louis is going to join us next. He has some steps for you to take. Nick Freitas joins us after that. He has some steps for you to take. We'll be back. 1% a year. That's how much testosterone we are losing. 1% a year. We have lost half, 50% of our testosterone in the last 50 years in this country. When you project that forward, 50 years is not a long time. That's the end of a country. You can't continue like this. It's because of all the estrogens and that we're drinking them, we're showering in them. And men know there's a problem. That's why men are running out of energy. That's why their moods are so low right now. Let natural herbal supplements from Chalk turn it around and change your life. I'm telling you, you probably don't even realize how low energy, how foggy your mind is. You will figure it out after you've been taking a male vitality stack from Chalk for 60 days, 90 days. Go get a subscription. You're about to feel like a different person. Chalk.com/JesseTV. You're about to feel better. We all start out as little babies, right? There's no exceptions to this. We all start out as little babies, a little innocent. I mean, I have 2 kids. And it's kind of crazy when you think about it that we all start out like that. And then one day, with the wrong mixture of what, I don't know, we'll talk to Alvin about it in a moment, you can turn out to be a vicious, violent little communist one day. Joining me now, Alvin Louis, president of Courage is a Habit. Alvin, I'm amazed, not just at these assassination attempts. I've already accepted that that's the way it is now. Isn't that terrible? But just how many Democrats talk about death, violence. I wish he'd die. I'd love to kill him. I can't believe he's not dead. This is something that has become Democrat discourse in this country. When Democrats gather together, I've heard it a million times, that's how they talk. Just violent people. Why?
Hey, Jesse, good to be back. Thanks for having me. They're just a culture of death. They're a death cult. If you look at everything they believe in, they either want to murder babies at 9 months and a day. If the baby's lucky enough to be born, they want to mutilate them, sterilize them. And then if they get past that, they want to turn them into useless social justice activists so that they're angry and miserable. And anybody that has a difference of opinion is Nazi and needs to die. And I think, in the beginning here, you're like, how does that happen? Because anybody who has kids or around children know just how beautiful and perfect they are, how loving they are. And it's like, how do you go from that 5 or 6 year old, and then by the time they're 15, 16, they're screaming to protect illegal aliens? How does that work? So that only works because we are sending them to these indoctrination centers for 7 hours a day, 5 days a week for 13 years. This is kindergarten through 12th grade. And I don't care how good of a parent you are, Jesse, or anybody else out there. You only have about 3 to 4 hours with them a day for the 5 days a week. And those 3 or 4 hours are not quality hours. You're burnt out, they're burnt out. You're just going through the rigmarole of homework and bath and going to sleep. So they get your children when they are fresh, the most fresh, and their brains are absorbing everything. And in government K through 12, the purpose of government K through 12 is not reading, writing, and math. The purpose of government K through 12 is to turn them into exactly what you said at the top of the segment here. The screaming, angry social justice activists, anything left wing, it doesn't matter what it is, because they can just pump it right into them because they've got the time. And so when in the earlier grades, it comes in as anti-bullying and be kind. That's why parents miss it. But it's always, courage is a habit. We encourage parents to ask the question, through whose lens? Through the lens of you, Jesse, your grandmother, your mother? Sure, awesome. Through the lens of a critical race theorist, through the lens of a transgender cultist, through the lens of someone who wants to flood this country with illegal aliens, then all of a sudden, be kind and empathy takes on a whole different meaning. And so when you see we had covered about how the kids are marching to protect ICE, and parents are like, what teacher influenced them last month or a couple months ago? It's no one teacher. If they're 16, they got it at elementary school or middle school at the very latest. It starts very early.
Alvin, that be kind, compassion, it obviously works on a lot of young people, but man alive, does it work on young women? We really don't fully grasp how much communists target young women and how susceptible they are to that. Yeah, exactly right. I don't want to see deportations. I want to be kind. I want to be seen as kind. Their wonderful motherly nature. It's not stupidity. It's just a wonderful motherly nature that's been perverted and twisted. Young women are prime targets for this kind of stuff.
They really are. And we often say that we don't have an oppression problem in this country, but we do have an idiot empathy problem. This primarily affects females, but if you want to get more specific, it affects pretty well off, insufferable woke white women. You see that in every case, whether it's protecting illegal aliens, revolving door for black and brown criminals, trans and kids. It's almost always this particular group because their life is too easy. They have a lot of white guilt. Most of that comes from when the older ones, of course, they come from when they were in college. This is why there was a huge college push for females. And they just started weaponizing their empathy, weaponizing their kindness. And then that turned into shame. And so, we often talk about white guilt, right? And as you do it so well, better than anybody else. But we don't actually call it white guilt. We try not to. And here's the difference why. When you feel guilty, it means you've done something wrong, some action, something you said, something you did, and then you try to apologize for it if you truly made a mistake, and then you try to move on. So guilt is about something you feel bad about something you did. Shame is about feeling bad about who you are. They're not teaching your kids, your white kids and these white women, guilt. It's shame. And this is a shame that has no redemption. This is a shame that you can't rectify that. There is no salvation from this religion. And the only way to do it is to continually just be the mouthpiece for whatever the legacy media tells you, whatever left-wing ideology is being fed to you. And then that's your only hope of redemption, but you never get there. And so this is where the weaponizing of that kindness and empathy in schools is so dangerous. And then it affects females because they truly do want to try to help the less fortunate, not realizing that, and some of them do realize it, but whatever they support actually comes back and hurts them the most. And that's the most insane thing about this weaponization of empathy and this kind of this plague of these low IQ woke white women, because whatever they support actually hurts them more than they hurt someone like you and me. Not to say men don't get hurt when illegal aliens are open borders, but the rape and the stabbing and the mugging and the beatings, it's always the old people and women, men and women's sports, women and men's bathroom. You and I, not that it's right, but you and I won't really care if a woman pretends to be a guy, comes into the men's bathroom. Have you seen the men's bathroom? But it's always the women that gets hurt. And unfortunately, there's a lot of women, of course, that don't believe in this. The children are innocent. But this voting bloc for the last 50 years, this radical feminist voting bloc has just been absolute poison to this country. And most of it started in academia.
I like that white shame. I like the way you explain that, Alvin. I'm totally stealing that, and I'm going to give you no credit whatsoever. But I'm stealing that, and I'm using that.
I don't expect you to.
No. All right. So how do we begin to fix the education system? It seems like such an enormous problem. What should we be doing now? If I'm watching right now, what should I be doing? Do I have any kind of a role to play? What can I do, small or large, to stop this indoctrination system we have?
I'm going to go in order. Everybody can do something. And in fact, we want everyone to do something. This isn't if I don't have a platform like Jesse Kelly, I can't do anything. So in order of small to large, if you have children in government K through 12, okay, if you cannot pull them, and I'm going to put that aside because I know that that's very difficult, but if you can, do everything you can to push to pull them, but I'm going to assume that you can't. This is where our tools come in at courageisahabit.org. So for example, right now, if you go to courageisahabit.org, tool of the week is the 5 teacher union lies. We created a toolkit and a turnkey letter that we want 50 of your 50 parents, 100 parents, 500 parents in a school district to flood their schools with this letter demanding and holding them accountable for why they're shutting down. Same thing when they did the ICE. If you scroll down our tools list, courageisahabit.org, click on tools, we had the same thing for the anti-ICE. It's about this micro flooding. And what we call it sand in the gears. Yeah, you're not going to change anything with one letter, but it's about that breakdown, that systemic breakdown. And this is exactly what they did with the schools. They didn't get it this way overnight. So this is something and we make it so that every parent can do it. It doesn't matter if you have no idea what a school board is. It doesn't matter if you've never been to a school board meeting. This is for every parent. Then when you get to obviously the next level of that is we want to start seeing parents start to demand that their legislators stop the mental health grants. The mental health grants is what drives, I would say, 90% of the indoctrination in schools because it's coming through mental health. And the parents don't see that. Americans don't see that because the mental health, the school counselors is that Trojan horse that brings in all this critical race theory, queer theory, but they disguise it under supporting all students. That's why you don't see it. And again, if you want to know more about that, just go under courageisahabit.org, click on collections and click on behind closed doors. That is our exposures of the counselors. So those are the big things that every American can do. Now, back to what I said about pulling your kids. Look, it is very common, Jesse, for people to say you're saving for college. That just rolls off your tongue, saving for college. You're leaving for college. It is ludicrous. That's the biggest lie that we've sold middle-class Americans. Why are you saving and going into debt when your children are already almost baked? For God's sakes, if you're going to go into debt, do it when they're young. Do it when they're little, when they are moldable. Take that risk, take that loan, make that sacrifice when they're 5, not when they're 18 or 17, because you have time to pay off that loan, but you get to decide how they're molded. By the time they get to 18 and 19, all you're doing is turning them over into the next level of indoctrination, and you're never going to get them back. Not to forget the mention of the ROI these days of college. So that's our biggest thing. If you really want to make a difference, starve these institutions. And every American can do that by pulling their kids. And of course, for God's sakes, don't send them to college.
What are the 5 lies teachers' unions tell parents?
Well, let's go through them. The first lie is that we are simply supporting all students. The walkouts are all about children, but it's not. It's all of the walkouts and the teachers' unions are all about driving teacher activists to left-wing Democrat candidates and to demand more critical race theory and more queer theory into schools. It's to demand more sympathy for open borders, kicking in the children of illegal aliens, and then everything comes down because you have all these kids that don't even speak a lick of English. So that's the first one. The second one is that we're only striking for smaller classes and better pay. That's nothing to do with money. It's all about they're taking the dues, and 95% of it goes towards left-wing Democrat either candidates or causes anyway. So it's nothing to do with class sizes. The picket line is basically grassroots. Obviously not grassroots. They'll tell you that. We need more funding to ensure every student has resources. Obviously, none of the money goes towards students or teachers. It goes towards more school counselors, more NGOs to bring in more queer theory, more professional development. And then the last one is that this is just a labor dispute because we're putting kids first. It is not putting kids first. It's all about whatever the left-wing agenda is. And this is not new. I know that there's been a lot of talk with the recent May 1st shutdown in some states, but they've been doing this for well over a decade. This is what the teachers' unions are. That's all they are. They are a Marxist political outfit. And so the stunt is this. This is a three-step stunt, or the three-step process. They create the crisis for parents. They create a crisis for parents and Americans by shutting down the schools. They blame the conservatives, and then they demand radical social change. That's the easy step there for their stunts.
Alvin, that is outstanding, man. You come back soon, all right? Thank you. That's pretty good. Nick Freitas is going to join us in a moment. Green Beret. To talk to him about education, raising kids, maybe pulling your kids out of school, homeschooling them. Maybe it's something you've kicked around and talked yourself out of for a variety of reasons. Talk to Nick about that as well. He knows a little something about it. Next. High interest debt is just the most soul-sucking thing in the world. Are you carrying this 20, 30% debt? It feels like you're drowning, and it feels like the worst part of it is no matter what you do, you can't get ahead. You got to try to make a minimum payment here. It feels like you have buried yourself and you're never going to get out. Well, I have great news for you. Do you own a home? American financing can get you out. American financing does this for a living. This is their specialty. Getting people a path out of this high interest debt. You have everything you need if you own a home. Well, I take that back. You need one more thing. You have to call them. They can't help you if you don't call them. 866-891-2821 or go to americanfinancing.net/Jesse. They are your path to financial freedom. You know, there's one of those quotes from someone I love, but I hate the quote. Winston Churchill has this quote, you probably heard it 1,000 times, that if you're under 30 and not a liberal, you have no heart. And if you're over 30 and not a conservative, you have no brain. I don't like it because it's always used as some sort of a justification that, well, every 18-year-old is going to be a filthy commie. And then hopefully they'll grow out of it when they start paying taxes one day. I don't think that has to be the case. I saw a YouGov poll recently. Americans aged 18 to 29, 62% of them viewed socialism as favorable. Is that just inevitable because of their age? Joining me now, the great Nick Freitas, author of the Manbook. I would highly recommend this, especially if you have a young man trying to forge his way in the world today. I think a Green Beret combat veteran probably knows a little bit of something about these things. All right, Nick, I don't accept that, well, if you're 18, you're just going to be Mao. I've got two teenage boys. They're bloodthirsty anti-communists.
Yeah. Well, and it's amazing because most communist leaders that you actually study about it were pretty bloodthirsty themselves. So the idea that that's the more compassionate worldview just seems absurd to me. But here's what I can almost promise you. If you were to ask the 62% of young people who say that they have a favorable opinion of socialism to describe what socialism is, none of them would say, oh, well, socialism is the abolition of the private ownership of the means of production where everything is owned by the state. None of them would say that. They would say things like, oh, I believe in social security or education or healthcare for poor people. They wouldn't describe what socialism is because they haven't been taught what it is. They've just been taught about vibes and feelings and maybe perhaps desirable instates. And then they just put the moniker socialism on top of that. And that's what they actually like. And it's pathetic, and it's indoctrination, not education.
Nick, I'm glad you brought up indoctrination. Obviously, there are wonderful teachers out there. There's no question about that. I know many of them, but I don't think people really truly get how many, look, they're child predators go into the teaching profession. Maybe not in the sexual, gross way that came across, but they are there to go after your kids. That is why they think they're there. They're not interested in teaching them reading, writing, and arithmetic. They're trying to steal them from you.
Well, I think there's a couple important things to understand here about the leftist worldview. And by leftist, I don't mean your grandmother who voted Democrat. I mean leftism. When you look at people like Antonio Gramsci, who is one of the intellectual godfathers of all this, he essentially said that, yeah, I like what Marx had to say about the world, and I certainly want Marx's end state, but it's not happening the way Marx anticipated. Why is that? Well, the conclusion he came to is it turns out capitalism is pretty good at actually delivering the goods. And so he said that if we actually want to achieve Marxist end states, then we need to have a Marxist culture. And the only way you're going to do that is if you actually infiltrate and control culturally shaping institutions. Now, when you use the word infiltrate and control, that sounds really bad, but from their worldview, it isn't. It's necessary. They have to control education. They have to control Hollywood. They have to control journalism. Why? Because these are the mechanisms by which they're going to correct your thinking in order to get it in line with Marxist ideology or socialism or whatever else it might be. And for anybody that thinks, well, that's ridiculous, Nick. Okay, well, I just got done doing a tabling event with Turning Point USA at University of Washington, Seattle. And for 2.5 hours, a group of students sat there and yelled and screamed and beat drums and shouted obscenities. They did not want to engage with arguments. They just wanted to yell and scream. Why? Because that's what they've been taught to do. And so I think it's important for people to understand that if you think higher education has kind of lost its path, okay, if you think higher education in general is very, very left wing, go to the education departments within a university campus. Go to the place where all of your public school teachers have to go to school in order to get their teaching degree to be able to get their credential and go into your public school. And then all of a sudden, it makes perfect sense why 62% of students living in the wealthiest country in the world thinks that the poorest, most depraved, most totalitarian systems are the ones that they should adopt.
Nick, has the right, I mean, we can call it the GOP, but the right, whatever way you want to put it, have we been too weak on this issue? Because you talk about these things, and you're of course correct, and we have all these education systems in the country, but we have red state after red state after red state after red state in the United States of America. We don't have 40 blue states in this country. We have the majority of these states are red states. Why do I not see a GOP war against these things? Are they scared? Are they complicit? Well, what is it?
Yes, I think there's two things. One, you have an older faction of the GOP that when they were going to public school, they said a prayer every day and they said the Pledge of Allegiance and they got taught that the founders were great guys. And they kind of assume that that's still what public school is. It isn't. And trying to convince them otherwise is very difficult at times. Same thing with a lot of parents. They think, oh no, Nick, you don't understand. I live in a really conservative district. This doesn't happen in my district. Ladies and gentlemen, I served on the education committee in the Virginia House of Delegates. I lived in a deep red conservative county. It was in my county. It was in our public school libraries, and I fought against it, and I told people about it, and it was shocked at the cognitive dissonance of people that didn't want to even do basic research to learn what was going on, because it was just easy to believe that, well, of course it's generally like when I went to school. It isn't. It's very different. And now we're having a generation. COVID started this. COVID started the generation of conservative parents that finally got a glimpse of what was going on inside the classroom and either pulled their kids out or became far more active within the public school system. And all of that's great. But the problem that they need to understand is you don't fix this problem with one election cycle. You don't fix this problem by showing up to a couple of school board meetings. You have to be much more deliberate. The good news is that you can pull your kids out. You don't have to subject them to this. But if you don't want it going on in your government-run schools, that is going to be a multi-decade battle. And the reason I know this is because it took the left decades to get it to this state, and it's going to take some time to fight for it.
So what do you say to these parents? Is it just that simple, Nick? You just got to pull them out? You got to, if you're a mom and maybe you're working 2 jobs, prices are high right now, you got to quit and homeschool the kids? And look, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I applaud it. I love when people do that. But is that the solution?
Well, here's what I'm going to tell people, because people will say, well, Nick, you got to sacrifice a lot to homeschool. That's true. You will also sacrifice to send your kids to a government run school that will teach them to despise your values and that you're ultimately the enemy. So you're going to sacrifice one way or another. What would you prefer to sacrifice? Now, for people that find themselves in financial situations where there's no way they can pay the mortgage and homeschool, what I would say is, one, our churches and our civic organizations in this country need to do a much better job of actually providing parents with alternatives to a school system that has become hostile to their values. If you're a church and you're really good at sending loads of money over to countries all around the world, but you're not actually helping to provide the parents within your church an alternative to a worldview and a school system which is indoctrinating their kids, I'm going to argue that maybe you have your priorities mixed up. If you're one of these really, really wealthy conservative donors that love to give millions of dollars to your old university so they can put your name on the side of a building and then staff it with professors that will teach the students that you're a horrible, evil, capitalist exploiter, maybe your priorities are a little bit off with respect to where you donate your money. There is no we have the resources, we have the time, we have the skill sets. There is no reasons why we cannot be creating more alternatives within primary education, secondary education, that actually teaches kids that, hey, while this country is not perfect, we're pretty dang good, and we've got some wonderful things within our history to look up to and aspire to. And while human beings can make really, really bad decisions, market systems where people are allowed to work in voluntary cooperation with one another are far better at alleviating poverty and suffering than centrally planned economies by politicians and bureaucrats that always require in varying degrees of totalitarianism to achieve their end states. There's no reason why we can't do this. It's just that, again, it's, well, I already pay my taxes. Okay, well, I got bad news. A lot of the left-wing organizations out there, a lot of left-wing bureaucrats, teachers, administrators, unions, et cetera, have taken over those institutions. You can either try to fight from within to take them back, or you can create alternatives. But I'm tired of hearing, well, Nick, it's too much of a sacrifice. You will sacrifice either way. Choose your sacrifice.
Nick, I had breakfast with my pastor some time back, and a wonderful pastor, absolutely wonderful. We love the guy. And during the course of this breakfast, he found out what I did, and so the politics came up. Now, this is an older, I would consider very wise man. When it came to the issues of politics, he might be the dumbest person I've ever met in my entire life. He had no idea about anything going on in the world. I remember my jaw was just hanging open, listening. It was like I was speaking to a child. How is it possible that pastors are have washed their hands this much of politics in this country?
I think a lot of it has to do with our formal seminaries. I think there's been a lot of left-wing infiltration of our seminaries, which probably explains why, especially within the Protestant faith, you have a major schism in every single major denomination. You have elements of the Lutheran Church, the Episcopalian Church, the Methodist Church, all in open heretical rebellion to the Bible. And I think a lot of it takes place within our formal educational institutions, where they've taught pastors that if you're a conservative one, well, then your job is to just focus on your flock and the Great Commission, right? You shouldn't have any sort of awareness about what's going on in the wider political world, because after all, we're talking about the next world, not this one. And it's a lie. It's not that we shouldn't be focused on the Great Commission. It's that God calls us to be salt and light everywhere. When you say the Lord's Prayer, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. That means that we should want to create this sort of environment here on earth where God's will is carried out. It is done by our civil servants, by our individuals, by our parishioners, whatever it might be. And so I think it's important that people recognize something. I'm not asking any pastor to be partisan. I don't think God is Republican or Democrat, but I don't think God's neutral on the issues either, because I've read scripture and he has some things to say about what a major political party in this country is pushing, whether it's killing babies in the womb through all 9 months worth of pregnancy, whether it's generally mutilating gender confused minors, whether it's pushing lawlessness and degeneracy. These are the sort of things that pastors need to wake up and speak toward, not because they're trying to achieve some sort of specific political end state on behalf of a political party, but because they honestly want thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven.
Nick, switching gears here to a subject that most people don't know anything about, and honestly, from my experience, I've seen what I consider to be good, well-meaning teachers fall victim to this. The textbooks themselves, the people who write the textbooks, The teachers oftentimes, I mean, teachers aren't always experts on every subject. They teach what's in the friggin' textbook. That's what's in the curriculum. They're given the textbook. The dirty communists are writing the textbooks in this country, even for Christian schools out there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, and again, part of the problem, part of the trap we've fallen into is, well, I pay my taxes and that's supposed to, take care of education. That's supposed to take care of all this stuff. I'm not supposed to have to worry about it anymore. Well, the bottom line is you need to realize that you can delegate authority to educate your children. You can't delegate responsibility for it. And I've spoken to parents before. We're like, Nick, we have wonderful teachers. I'm like, great. And none of those wonderful teachers wrote the textbook. None of those wonderful teachers passed or voted on the laws which governed what they have to teach within their schools. They could be wonderful. They could be doing their best job against a horribly corrupt system, but it's still a horribly corrupt system. So the question is what are you going to do to change that? You can fight internally. You can fight internally against an organization and an infrastructure that has all the advantages, or you can find alternatives. And here's the thing that I love. If you would have asked me, why did we start homeschooling initially? It was out of necessity. Then we started homeschooling because we put our kids back into public school in a deep red conservative district. And in 1 year, we pulled them out because of everything that was going on within the schools. And it hadn't even gotten as bad as it is now back then. But if you ask us finally, why did we homeschool? It's because we absolutely loved it. The amount of time that we recaptured with our kids, the ability to see your child struggling on an issue, and instead of having to fight through a curriculum or a textbook that they don't understand, being able to immediately shift it to one that they do, and then watch them blossom and actually love learning, because it's not about rote memorization. It's about the transference of knowledge and wisdom, which they can find everywhere. That is what has made us such huge believers in this process, about, once again, taking control of the things you can. There are so many things within the political world that you have very little say over. Maybe you get to vote once every 2 or 4 years, but that's it. There are so many other things within the realm of your life and your children's education which you can take ownership over. And I would just encourage people, because there are more resources now than have ever existed before. Go check out one of the conventions at great homeschool conventions. Go find that network of people that not only want you to succeed, but will help you succeed. Because there is nothing that compares with raising 3 children all throughout high school, having all of them graduate, having them love the Lord, love their country, despise communism, and being productive, well-adjusted members of society. That is a great feeling. We took little humans that we got to make, and we turned them into adults we want to be friends with. I mean, that's a victory.
It is truly one of the biggest blessings. My wife and I talk about it all the time. We want to hang out with our teenagers, and they want to hang out with us. They're just wonderful human beings. I don't have any idea how that happened. All right, switching gears, the university system. Obviously, I'm big on the trades and not going to the university system. We can get to that in a few, but we also can't long-term sustain a nation if our higher education system is a communist finishing school. It seems like such an insurmountable problem, but we have to mount it, for much lack of a better way to put that. How do we solve this problem?
Well, so I used to be the subcommittee chairman for higher education in Virginia. And one of the biggest things I found was the collusion between higher education and government to essentially set higher education up for success at the expense of their students. And I sincerely mean that. It was very frustrating to watch higher education officials explain to me why what they did was so critical and so important that I needed to steal more money from my constituents in order to give it to them so they could set up new gender studies programs. So once again, the question I'm going to ask you is, you have some institutions out there that are fighting the good fight. I love Liberty. I love Regent. I love Hillsdale. I love Grove City College. There's others out there that are great too. There's a lot of other ones that used to be great who aren't anymore. There's a lot of universities that say they're Christian and they're not. So you can do one of two things. You can pick a good institution, you can fight for one that has been co-opted, or you can set up alternatives. And like you said before, this idea that a college degree is an absolute necessity is false. In fact, the only areas for which it is an absolute necessity are areas where the academy has colluded with the government to give themselves not only special privileges with respect to subsidies, but also legal categories where you have to have a college degree in order to practice something. Why? Why can't you get your higher education in a different format or in a different way to be more applicable? Why do you have to go through all these additional classes that have nothing to do with your major, nothing to do with your ambitions, and are set up almost exclusively for indoctrinating purposes, right? We can set up alternatives to this. And I will tell people right now, look, if your dream is to go to college and it's necessary for your career field, fine. Be wise about the university you pick, because what a college degree is a credential. And a credential might open a door, but it doesn't keep you employed forever, because sooner or later, you know what your employer wants to see? You have capabilities, that you have work ethic, that you know what you're doing. And I've gotten to a point in my own business now where when I see a college degree, automatically the first thing that comes to my mind is not, oh, wow, this guy is intelligent, or, oh, wow, this person really went through something difficult and achieved something significant and notable, or this person has a bunch of capabilities. No, the first thing that goes through my mind is, am I about to hire an activist that thinks their job is to not do the job I've hired them for, but to try to use my company as a mechanism to achieve whatever social change they've been taught to desire? And so a lot of times for me, when I see a college degree, if it doesn't come from one of those universities that I mentioned, I'm automatically skeptical of what I'm getting, because that degree no longer conveys capability. A lot of time it conveys a headache. And so be careful about what you choose. And like you said, we look at what AI is doing right now, and there's so much concern about the jobs that AI is going to eliminate. I'm going to tell you right now, AI is far more likely to eliminate jobs for finance bros and Wall Street than it is for your plumber, your electrician, your carpenter, right? We haven't taught the robots how to do that just yet, but they can data mine financial data very, very quickly and come to pretty good conclusions about what's going to happen in the future. So I would just say, think wisely about what the economy is going to look like going forward, and make the decisions that are going to set you up for marketable success. Don't go chasing after something that everyone tells you you need simply because they went out and got it. Actually look at the results in the field.
What's it mean to be a dangerous dad?
To be a dangerous dad is to have the capacity and the capability for violence on behalf of the people you love, but never toward the people you love. So my goal was that when my daughters or my son said, my dad could beat up your dad, that there was a reasonable possibility that that was true, not because I would do it, but because I wanted my kids to always be safe and secure, that I was the sort of father that could come in and not only protect them spiritually or emotionally or intellectually, but that I could also protect them physically. One of the things that I tell young men is you need to have a violent hobby, right? It could be shooting, it could be hunting, it could be boxing, wrestling, jujitsu, whatever it is. Develop those kind of skill sets because it's important for your own confidence, but it's also important because one day, God forbid, your wife or your children should ever need you, you want to be the man that they can call in order to protect them.
Nick, tell me about the Manbook.
So the Manbook is a bit of a passion project. I'm 46 years old. I've been married 27 years. I've been a father for 23 years. I was a Green Beret combat veteran. I served in public office as a state legislator. I've owned a couple businesses. And basically what this book is me sharing the things that I learned, a lot of times the hard way. Because I think a lot of young men right now are asking some very important and very relevant questions about what does it mean to be a good man? What does it mean to be a man in general? And the thing that I try to tell them is, well, whenever somebody looks at you and says, be a man, what they almost inevitably mean is that you're the sort of person that should be able to keep your word and get the job done, regardless of discomfort, regardless of pain, and regardless of danger or fear. And if you want to be that sort of man, that's something you choose to be. Now, I would argue that it's something God calls us to be. I don't advocate for any form of masculinity. I advocate for biblical masculinity. The sort of man that is not just strong and successful, but the sort of man that is honorable and trustworthy. And so these were various lessons I learned, and some of them are very serious. Some of them go into things like how to defend your faith. How do you know what's worth dying for? And some things are a little bit more, just a little bit more fun, like how to properly cook a steak, or how to kick in a door, or what sort of self-defense weapon should you own for your home. So I go into all of those various things. And again, it's not preachy. It's more about just talking about things I've learned. And if I was going to do it all over again, these are the things I would want someone to give me some insight on.
People don't know how easy it is to hurt yourself trying to kick in a door if you do it like you see in the movies. I try to tell people this, but nobody wants to know. Nick, thank you, brother. I appreciate it. We have final thoughts. Next. And here's the thing. I'm a big person on tone setting the tone. When you wake up in the morning, does it or does it not set the tone for your day? When you wake up and you know you had a bad night's sleep, you know right away, you've already got it in your head, today's gonna suck. Work's gonna suck, this is gonna suck, I'm gonna be tired, I'm gonna be sucking on coffee all day, and vice versa. When you have an amazing night's sleep, it's like you spring out of bed and you know today's gonna be good. Whatever comes of this day, it's gonna be good. You can feel like that every single day if you start drinking a cup of hot chocolate before bed, but not any hot chocolate. Dream powder from Beam. Mine is cinnamon chocolate. They have several flavors. It has all these natural things in it you see there on your screen. You sip on it before bed, you drift off to sleep like a little bitty baby, and you wake up and have a great day. Every day. Shopbeam.com/Jesse Kelly. We can win this fight, and it will not be fast, and it will not be easy. And we're already taking the necessary step one to win the fight. We're waking up. That's step one. You can't do anything until you wake up and you're aware of the problem. We're getting to be more aware of the problem. We're getting involved. It's just going to be a long slog, and we have to fight it. Our kids are at stake. We'll do it again.